Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the window of the Earth Embassy on Station Cosmos, looking out at the endless stars. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Behind her, the screens flickered with data that made her stomach turn. The Galactic Council was preparing to destroy humanity's future, and most people on Earth had no idea. 40 years ago, humanity had sent its first contact team to meet the wider galaxy. They were nervous, excited, uncertain about what they would find. What they found was a universe filled with ancient civilizations, advanced technology, and political systems more complex than anything Earth had ever seen. The Galactic Council had existed for over 5,000 years, ruled by species that seemed almost godlike in their power and knowledge. Humanity was invited to join. It was supposed to be an honor. The Council said they welcomed young species with fresh ideas. They promised friendship, trade, technology sharing, and a seat at the table where the galaxy's future was decided. Earth's leaders celebrated. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They were part of something bigger. But Sarah had learned the hard way that the Galactic Council was not interested in fresh ideas. They were interested in control. The evidence was everywhere if you knew where to look. 3 years ago, humanity proposed a new jump gate technology that could cut travel time across the galaxy in half. The vote on the proposal lasted exactly 12 minutes before being rejected. The Vorathi, the oldest and most respected species in the Council, said it was too dangerous and violated established safety protocols. But Sarah had the security footage from their private chamber. The Vorathi had never even reviewed the technical documents. They simply voted no because innovation made them uncomfortable. Then came the medical breakthrough. Human scientists developed a cure for the Kellyan fever, a disease that had killed millions across the galaxy. The Council took the cure, implemented it everywhere, and somehow forgot to give credit to Earth. When Sarah brought this up in a Council meeting, a Kellyan diplomat smiled politely and said, "We did credit you, in a footnote, in a file, on the secondary data server." Everyone in the chamber had laughed. Sarah had not. The economic pressure came next. Trade restrictions on human goods, quotas on human technology exports, tariffs that made it impossible for human companies to compete. The excuse was always the same: we must protect our established trading partners from unfair competition. The truth was simpler. Humanity was growing too fast, innovating too quickly, and the old powers were afraid. Sarah pulled up the latest evidence on her personal screen, the one that was encrypted with military-grade human technology. This was the smoking gun. The document had been leaked by a sympathetic Kellyan scientist named Zorthas, someone who had been kind to Sarah over the years and believed that the Galactic Council had lost its way. The resolution was called 7734. The official title was the Cosmic Quarantine Accord for Developing Species. In plain language, it meant exile. If the vote passed, humanity would be confined to the solar system. No trade with other worlds. No travel beyond designated space. No new technology sharing. No voice in council decisions. Humanity would be locked away like a dangerous child that the adults could not control. The worst part was that the resolution was deliberately vague about what would happen if humanity tried to break the quarantine. The language was polite, but the meaning was clear. Violation would result in necessary corrective action. That was council speak for military intervention. Sarah had 3 weeks to stop this vote. 3 weeks to convince the Galactic Council that humanity was not a threat. 3 weeks to save her species from isolation and stagnation. She turned away from the window and opened a secure communication channel to Earth. Her hands shook as she typed, not from fear but from anger. Humanity had come to the stars in peace. They had played by the rules. They had respected the ancient customs of the Council. They had shown humility and deference to species that were millions of years old. And for what? To be punished for being good at what they did. The video call connected to the United Earth Council. All 9 members appeared on the screen, their faces serious. They had been waiting for this call. Sarah showed them the document. She explained what it meant. She watched their faces darken with understanding and rage. The leader, a woman named President Amara Okonkwo, spoke first. "How long until the vote?" she asked. 21 days, Sarah said. "They announced it officially this morning. The Vorathi said they wanted to give all species time to prepare their statements." "Can we stop it?" asked General Marcus Webb, humanity's military representative on the council. His voice was tight. Sarah took a breath. "Officially, no. We have 4 votes on the council. There are 47 member species. We would need 24 votes against the resolution to block it. Our allies, the young species we've been trading with, they're scared. The council is punishing anyone who votes against the leadership. 3 small nations already lost their trade agreements just for questioning the resolution." "Then we're finished," said Dr. Rajesh Patel, humanity's lead scientist. "They've set this up perfectly. We can't fight them militarily. We can't win in a vote. We can't even appeal to their sense of fairness because they don't have one." But Sarah was shaking her head. "No," she said quietly. "We can't win by fighting on their battlefield. We need a different kind of game." She paused, thinking about the station above her head. The Galactic Council headquarters, a massive structure that had stood for 200 years, expanded and rebuilt many times but always maintaining its original foundation. She was thinking about who had built that foundation. She was thinking about materials and weaknesses and human ingenuity. "Give me 48 hours, Sarah said. "I need to meet with some people here on the station. Engineers, specialists, people who understand infrastructure and materials. Once I understand what we're working with, I'll have a plan. A real plan, not diplomacy, not politics. A plan that actually works." President Okonkwo leaned forward. "What are you thinking, Dr. Chen?" Sarah allowed herself a small smile. It was dangerous, what was forming in her mind. It was bold and risky and probably insane, but it was also very human. It was the kind of thing that humans had been doing since they first learned to use tools, taking what they had, understanding how things worked, and changing the game when the rules were stacked against them. "I'm thinking," Sarah said slowly, "that the Galactic Council made a mistake. They thought they knew everything about us. They thought they understood human nature, but they don't. They've never lived on a planet where everything is fighting to kill you. They've never had to survive by being cleverer than your enemies. They've never been the underdogs." She locked eyes with the president. "We're about to teach them something important, and I think they're going to learn it the hard way." The connection to Earth went silent for a long moment. Then President Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Do what you need to do, Sarah. Humanity's future is in your hands." As the screens went dark, Sarah turned back to the window. Out there, 47 species were preparing to vote humanity into exile. And down in the engineering sections of Station Cosmos, human minds were about to solve a problem that no one even knew existed yet. The game was just beginning, and humanity was about to show the Galactic Council exactly why you should never underestimate a species that had nothing to lose. The underground tunnels beneath Station Cosmos were a marvel of alien engineering. Sarah had never been down here before. Most human diplomats never had reason to explore the service levels and equipment storage areas that kept the massive space station running. But she was not most diplomats anymore. Engineer James Rodriguez met her at the entrance to the main structural hub. He was a tall man with dark eyes that had always looked sharp to Sarah. Now they were burning with intensity and focus. He had worked on the station for 15 years, maintaining human systems and learning the station's architecture inside and out. If anyone could help her with what she was planning, it was him. "You said you needed to understand how the station is built," James said as they walked through the corridors. Their footsteps echoed off metal walls. "Specifically, you wanted to know about the central chamber's foundation. That's the big council hall, right, where the vote happens?" "Yes." Sarah said, "I need to know everything. What holds it up? What materials were used, who built it, everything. James led her to a vast chamber filled with displays and holographic models of the station's structure. He pulled up a detailed schematic of the council chamber and its supporting systems. The image showed a massive circular room, supported by 4 enormous columns that extended deep into the station's core. The station was built by the Vorathi 200 years ago, James explained. But they didn't do it alone. They used materials and engineering provided by the Zyxthara, very advanced stuff, metamaterials mostly, things that bend light and gravity and electromagnetic waves in ways that normal materials can't. He zoomed in on the columns. They were not simple pillars. They were complex structures with intricate geometric patterns running through them, beautiful and completely alien to human understanding. The columns are made of Zyxthara composite, James continued. It's stronger than anything we've ever created. It can support weight that would crush any conventional material, but here's the interesting part. He pulled up another file, filled with technical data and molecular diagrams. About 5 years ago, I was helping repair a damaged section of the station. I found some research papers in the Zyxthara archives, data about the properties of their composite materials. He pointed to specific sections of the data. The Zyxthara materials have a weakness, not a structural weakness. The material itself is still stronger than anything we have. But at the molecular level, the bonds that hold the material together are sensitive to specific electromagnetic frequencies. If you expose the material to those frequencies over a long period, the bonds start to break down. It's slow. It's almost invisible, but eventually the material degrades. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. This was it. This was what they needed. Can we generate those frequencies? She asked. Yes, James said. Not easily, but yes. We would need specialized equipment. And it would have to be placed exactly right, in exactly the right locations, to weaken the structure without making it obvious what was happening. How long would it take, Sarah asked, for the material to degrade enough that it becomes dangerous? James was quiet for a moment. If we placed equipment in all 4 columns and kept the frequency generators running continuously, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. But Sarah, I need to ask you what you're thinking, because if I understand what you're saying, we're talking about sabotaging the station. We're talking about making the council chamber structurally unsound. Sarah nodded slowly. She had known this moment would come. She had known she would have to tell someone what she was really planning. We're talking about holding the Galactic Council hostage, she said quietly. Not with violence, with the threat of structural collapse, with the ability to bring down the very floor they're standing on if they vote against us. James stared at her. His face went through several expressions very quickly: shock, fear, outrage, and then slowly something else. Something that looked like respect mixed with dark understanding. That's insane, he said finally. That's absolutely insane, and it might actually work. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah assembled a team. Not all in the same room, never where the council's security systems could monitor them. She worked in small groups, meeting briefly, sharing information, and then separating. A materials specialist named Dr. Lisa Wang, who understood how to modify equipment. A systems engineer named Kenji Tanaka, who could network the devices together remotely. An inventory specialist named Maria Santos, who had the access codes to the station's supply systems. And others, carefully selected, each one knowing only their small part of a much larger plan. They manufactured the devices in secret, in the human research laboratories where the council's scanners were less intrusive. The devices looked ordinary. Some appeared to be routine maintenance components. Others looked like standard equipment upgrades. None of them looked like they could destroy a space station. Each device contained a miniaturized electromagnetic frequency generator, powered by batteries designed to last for weeks. The generators would emit specific frequencies, targeted at the molecular bonds in the Zyxthara composite material. When activated, The devices would slowly degrade the material from the inside out, creating weaknesses that would be invisible to standard scans. The hardest part was placement. The devices had to go inside the columns, into the very heart of the station's structure. But humans had been working on this station for decades. They had maintenance access. They had work schedules. They had routine duties that no one questioned. One by one, the devices were smuggled into position. During routine maintenance shifts, hidden in equipment deliveries, placed by engineers who looked like they were doing ordinary repair work. Within 10 days, all the devices were in place. 42 miniaturized frequency generators, distributed throughout the 4 support columns that held up the council chamber floor. Sarah stood in the observation deck overlooking the council chamber. From here, she could see the vast circular room where 47 species gathered to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. The enormous floor, supported by those 4 massive columns. The columns that now contained devices that would slowly, invisibly, destroy them. In 6 weeks, the material inside those columns would be dangerously degraded. The floor would still seem solid. It would still look safe. But it would be one strong vibration away from catastrophic failure. It would be like standing on ice so thin that any wrong step would plunge you into freezing water below. And that was exactly the point. Sarah's communication device buzzed. It was James Rodriguez from the engineering section. "All devices are in place," he said, his voice careful and professional. "Standby frequency transmitters are ready. All we need is your authorization to activate the system." Sarah took a long breath. This was the moment where she crossed from planning to doing. This was the moment where diplomacy truly ended and something else began. "Activate the system," she said quietly. "Begin degradation sequence 1. Set all devices to operate at 70% power. And James, after this is done, there's no going back." "I know," James said, "and I'm ready." Sarah ended the communication and looked out at the council chamber once more. In 6 weeks, there would be a vote that decided humanity's fate. But the Galactic Council had no idea that they were already standing on the edge of a cliff. They had no idea that beneath their feet, in the very foundations of their power, human hands were dismantling everything they trusted. The Vorathi were brilliant, ancient, and powerful, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated how creative humans could be when their survival was at stake. They had not understood that humans would do anything at all, to protect their species. The countdown had begun. The frequencies were flowing through those columns, breaking bonds at the molecular level. And in 42 days, the Galactic Council would learn a lesson that should have been obvious from the start. Never, ever underestimate humanity, especially when you've given us nothing to lose. The council chamber was filled with life on voting day. Delegates from 47 different species occupied seats arranged in a vast circle. The Vorathi representatives sat in positions of honor at the top of the chamber, their crystalline bodies catching light and throwing it across the walls in patterns of color. The Zyxthara occupied the lower sections, their smooth features and dark eyes reflecting confidence and control. And scattered throughout were dozens of other species, some humanoid, some not, each one representing trillions of lives back home. Sarah stood in the human delegation section, which occupied only a small space despite humanity representing billions of people. She watched the Vorathi delegate stand to present resolution 7734. The words were formal and cold, each one delivered with the weight of authority that came from ruling half the galaxy for 5,000 years. "We present before the Council a proposal for the protection of established cosmic order," the Vorathi said. His name was Vorhak, and he had been pushing this resolution through every committee and subcommittee for months. The species designated as humanity, having recently achieved space travel and technological advancement, demonstrates concerning behavioral patterns. Their innovations appear designed to destabilize established economic systems. Their military capacity is growing at an unsustainable rate. Their approach to problem solving is reckless and often disruptive to long-standing protocols. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her face calm. This was what she had expected. This was the same argument they had used before, the same dismissal of humanity's achievements as dangers rather than contributions. The cosmic quarantine accord will place humanity in a contained zone until such time as they can demonstrate maturity as a galactic species, Vorhak continued. This action is not punitive. It is protective. We protect the galaxy from their recklessness, and we protect them from responsibilities they are not yet equipped to handle. The vote began. Species after species cast their votes in favor of the resolution. The Vorathi voted yes, setting the tone for those who followed them. The Zyxthara voted yes, their economic bloc following like a school of fish. The Kellians voted yes, surprising no one but disappointing Sarah deeply. Species that had received human medical aid, that had benefited from human technology, voted yes without hesitation. Sarah kept a careful count. 43 votes in favor. Only the humans themselves, the Korvathi, the young species called the Tenders, and the scattered voices of 3 minor planets voted no. It was not even close. The Vorathi raised his crystalline hand to announce the passage of Resolution 7734. Sarah could see him preparing to speak the words that would exile humanity from the galactic community. This was the moment. This was the last second before the Council voted her entire species into isolation. She stood up. The chamber fell silent. Protocol demanded that only designated speakers address the Council during voting sessions. For Sarah to stand without permission was a direct violation. The Voratha's crystalline features turned toward her, and she could see what might have been annoyance in the light refracting through his body. "Human delegate," the Vorathi said coldly, "you are out of order." "I request a final statement," Sarah said. Her voice was steady and calm, even though her heart was racing. "Before the vote is made official, I request the right to speak on behalf of my species. That is our right under the Cosmic Charter, Article 12, Section 3. The chamber rustled with tension. The Vorathi clearly wanted to deny her request, but to do so would violate the very rules the Council had established. After a long moment, he gestured coldly. "You may speak." Sarah stepped forward toward the center of the chamber. She looked up at the Vorathi, then slowly around at all the other species gathered here. Thousands of eyes watching her. Billions of people back home watching through video feeds. "You have decided to remove humanity from the galactic community," she began. "You have decided that we are too unpredictable, too dangerous, too different from your established ways. And you have made this decision without ever asking us what we think, without ever truly understanding what we are capable of." She activated a device on her wrist. Instantly, screens throughout the chamber came to life with data, frequency patterns, electromagnetic signatures, molecular composition maps, technical readouts that showed exactly what had been happening in the support columns of the Council chamber for the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks ago, Sarah continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, humanity placed 42 devices inside the support structure of this chamber. These devices have been emitting specific electromagnetic frequencies designed to degrade the Zyxthara composite material that holds up the floor you are all standing on. The chamber erupted. Species jumped to their feet. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages, most of which the translation system struggled to process. Guards moved toward Sarah, but she did not move. She simply raised her hand and spoke louder. "Each of these devices is still active," she said. "Each one is still broadcasting the degradation frequency. The material in your support columns is now significantly weakened. Not enough to cause immediate collapse, but enough that any significant vibration, any impact, any sudden weight shift would cause catastrophic structural failure. This entire chamber would collapse, all of you would die. The chaos reached a fever pitch. The Vorathi was demanding security details. The Zyxthara were screaming for immediate action. Guards rushed toward Sarah, but human security team members moved to intercept them. It was a standoff, and everyone in the chamber knew that Sarah held all the power. "I have not finished," Sarah said, and somehow her voice cut through all the noise. "We could kill every single one of you right now. We could bring down this chamber and end the Galactic Council forever. Humanity has the power to do that, and no one would be able to stop us." She paused, letting that sink in. She watched the fear on their faces. She watched the ancient Vorathi, with all his power and authority, standing on a floor that might collapse beneath him at any moment. "But we will not," Sarah said quietly, "because that is not what humanity is. We are angry. We are bitter about how you have treated us. We are furious that you would vote to exile us without cause, without proof, without mercy. But we are not murderers. We are not tyrants. We are a species that believes in better things than revenge." She lowered her hand. "So here is what is going to happen. You are going to listen to what I have to say. You are going to listen very carefully, and you are going to decide whether to work with us or against us. Because make no mistake, we will deactivate these devices. We will repair the damage, but only if you agree to our terms." The chamber was silent now. All eyes were on Sarah. The Vorathi made a gesture, and slowly the guards backed away. "The vote on Resolution 7734 is void," Sarah announced. "It does not matter how you voted. It is irrelevant now, because humanity just demonstrated something to the galaxy that you need to understand. We are not a threat because of weapons. We are a threat because of intelligence. We are dangerous because we can think in ways that you cannot. We solve problems that you do not even know exist. We survive by being creative and adaptive, and willing to do things that no other species would consider." She looked directly at the Vorathi. "You told us we were too young, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be part of your community. Well, you were right about one thing. We are different, and you have just learned why that difference matters. We just held the entire Galactic Council hostage, and none of you saw it coming. None of your sensors detected what we were doing. None of your security systems stopped us. We did this by being human. By thinking outside your rules and systems and assumptions about how the universe works." The chamber was absolutely silent. Sarah could hear the sound of her own breathing echoing off the walls. "My species will accept Resolution 7734 being struck from the record," she said. "And in exchange, we will deactivate the degradation sequence and repair the support columns. We will offer our technology and expertise to rebuild this station better and stronger than it was. This is our offer. This is the only offer you will receive." She walked back to her seat and sat down, her hands trembling slightly but her face perfectly calm. The Galactic Council had tried to exile humanity, but they had not understood one simple truth. Humanity did not follow other people's rules when survival was on the line. Humanity wrote its own rules, and it was going to force the galaxy to recognize that, whether they liked it or not. The emergency session began 72 hours after Sarah's revelation. The council chamber was being reinforced with temporary supports, while human engineers and Zyxthara engineers worked together to assess the damage and plan the restoration. The irony was not lost on anyone. The species that had been voting to exile humanity was now depending on humanity's expertise to keep their station from falling apart. The emergency sessions were held in a smaller chamber, one level below the main council hall. This room was newer, built within the last 100 years, and it did not depend on the compromised support columns. Sarah sat in the human delegation section with a small team that included James Rodriguez, Dr. Lisa Wang, and several other human engineers. Across from her, the Vorathi delegation sat in their traditional position of honor, but there was no honor in their faces now. There was only frustration and barely controlled anger. Vorhek spoke first. His crystalline body seemed darker somehow. as if his anger was literally changing his molecular structure. You have committed an act of sabotage against the Galactic Council. You have threatened the lives of representatives from 47 species. You have violated every established law regarding station security and military action. Humanity will face judgment for these crimes. Sarah had expected this. She had prepared for it. The Vorathi are correct, she said calmly. By the standards of the Galactic Council law, what humanity did was illegal. However, I would argue that the circumstances were extraordinary and required extraordinary response. A Kellian delegate stood up. Kellians were humanoid and roughly Earth-human-sized, but with blue-green skin and eyes that could see infrared. Their diplomat's name was Sortha, and he had always seemed sympathetic to humanity. "Let us be clear about something," Sortha said. "What happened here was an act of war. You sabotaged our station. You threatened us. You held our entire species hostage. No amount of clever argument changes that fundamental fact." "No," Sarah agreed. "It does not. But I want to ask the Council something. If the situation had been reversed, if humanity had voted to exile the Kellians, and the Kellians had discovered our plans and taken action to stop it, what would we have done?" She paused, giving them time to think about that question. "We would have called it espionage," Sarah continued. "We would have called it a preemptive military action. We would have called it self-defense, because that is what it was. The Galactic Council voted to sentence humanity to isolation and potential extinction. Not tomorrow, not in a year, but inevitably. Confinement leads to stagnation. Stagnation leads to decline. The Council knew this. So what humanity did was defend itself against an act of aggression dressed up as law." The Zyxthara delegate stood now. The Zyxthara were the engineers, the builders, the species that took pride in their creations. This delegate's name was Thrax, and his composure was dangerously thin. "You have damaged work that took my species 2 centuries to create," Thrax said, his voice low and controlled. "You have weakened materials that were designed to last 10,000 years. This is not defense. This is destruction." "Yes," Sarah said, "it is, and we will repair it better than it was before." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Thrax stared at her. "What?" "Humanity will repair the damaged support columns," Sarah said. "We will also upgrade the station's security systems, reinforce the structure with additional supports, and implement technology that will make the station safer and more stable than it has ever been. In exchange, the Galactic Council will agree to certain terms. These terms are not negotiable." She activated a screen that displayed a document. The words were carefully chosen. They were specific and detailed, and they covered everything that humanity needed to survive as a galactic power. "First," Sarah read, "Resolution 7734 is permanently struck from the record. It will not be reintroduced in any form. Second, humanity receives equal voting rights on all council committees and subcommittees. Third, humanity receives permanent representation on the Council's Technology Committee and the Security Committee. Fourth, the economic sanctions currently placed against humanity are immediately lifted. Fifth, joint research initiatives will be established where human problem-solving methods are integrated into Council research divisions. Sixth, humanity's technological discoveries will receive proper credit and compensation." She looked up from the screen. "These terms ensure that humanity is never again treated as a minor species to be managed by more powerful civilizations. These terms ensure that we have a voice in our own fate, and these terms are the price of our cooperation." Vorhak stood up, his crystalline body flickering with angry reds and oranges. "You are in no position to make demands. We could execute you here. We could destroy your ships. We could take your planet and redistribute its resources to more deserving species." "You could," Sarah agreed, "but you will not." "And why not?" Vorhek's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Because you are afraid," Sarah said simply. "You have just discovered that you do not actually control this station. You do not actually control your own safety. A species that you thought was primitive and young and stupid was able to penetrate your most secure facilities. We were able to sabotage the very foundation of your power while your best security systems missed everything. And you have no idea what else we might do if you make the wrong choice now. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber, not waiting for permission. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Think about what you have learned in the last 72 hours, Sarah said. Think about how your engineers could not detect our devices. Think about how your sensors did not register the degradation happening right beneath your feet. Think about how 42 pieces of human equipment went unnoticed in a station where every moving part is supposedly monitored. And then imagine what else humanity might be capable of if we had 3 months to plan instead of 3 weeks, or 3 years. She turned slowly to face each delegation in turn. Humanity does not want to be your enemies. We want to be your partners. We want to contribute to the Council and to the galaxy. We want to share our technology and our ideas and our way of thinking about problems. But we will not be your servants. We will not be your isolated laboratory species that you can study and control. If you choose that path, if you choose to treat us as subordinates, then you need to understand what you will be fighting against. Sarah walked back to her seat and sat down. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders. You have 24 hours to accept humanity's terms, she said. If you refuse, humanity will reveal everything we have done, everything we know about your station's vulnerabilities, and everything we are capable of. We will broadcast it to every species in the galaxy. We will show them how a young species with intelligence and courage was able to threaten the ancient powers. And I guarantee that within a year, you will have a dozen other young species trying the same tactics. You will have chaos. You will have the end of the power structure that has kept you in control for 5,000 years. She leaned back in her chair. So you have 2 choices. You can accept our terms and benefit from human partnership, or you can refuse and watch everything you have built crumble. The decision is yours. The emergency session ended shortly after. The delegations left to discuss among themselves what had just happened. Sarah sat alone in the chamber with James Rodriguez, watching the screens that showed the damaged support columns beneath the floor. "Do you think they will accept?" James asked quietly. Sarah took a long breath. "Yes, they have no other choice. We have given them a path forward that does not involve war or destruction. They are proud, but they are not stupid. They will accept because accepting is the only way they can save face." "And what if we had failed?" James asked. "What if the devices had been discovered before today?" "Then humanity would have tried something else," Sarah said. "Because we cannot accept exile. We cannot accept being caged. We will always find a way forward no matter what obstacles we face. That is what it means to be human." Outside the station, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the civilizations that inhabited the galaxy. But within the station, everything was changing. The age of the Galactic Council's absolute authority was ending, and the age of humanity's emergence as a true power was just beginning. 6 months had passed since Sarah's bold action in the council chamber. The repaired station now stood as a monument to human-alien cooperation and innovation. The support columns that had once been weakened by Sarah's devices were now stronger than they had ever been, reinforced with a hybrid material that combined Zyxthara engineering with human design principles. The new support system was so advanced that it would not need major repairs for at least 5,000 years. The irony was not lost on THRX, the Zyxthara engineer who had watched human engineers work alongside his people to create something neither species could have achieved alone. The council chamber itself had been expanded and redesigned. The seating arrangement now reflected a new reality. Humanity no longer occupied a small section off to the side. The human delegation had a place of honor directly between the Vorathi and the Zyxthara, representing the middle ground between ancient power and emerging innovation. More than that, the very concept of a single position of honor had been eliminated. All species now sat in a circular arrangement where no single position was more important than any other. Sarah stood in the new chamber, watching as the expanded council began its first session under the new rules. The vote that had come 24 hours after her ultimatum had been almost unanimous. Only 3 small species, too afraid to change their allegiances, had abstained. 44 species had voted to accept humanity's terms. The Vorathi and Zyxthara, with no choice and no way to back down without losing all authority, had voted yes. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Sarah. Once humanity was officially granted equal standing on the council, something unexpected occurred. Other young species began stepping forward. The Korvathi asked for expanded rights. The Tenders demanded equal committee representation. A dozen smaller civilizations started demanding that the council give them credit for their contributions, rather than simply absorbing their achievements into the collective record. The Galactic Council, suddenly faced with the possibility that the entire power structure could collapse, made a choice. Instead of fighting change, they embraced it. They created a new system of governance where young species could earn greater representation through demonstrated achievement. They established committees where human creativity worked alongside Vorathi logic and Zyxthara engineering precision. They created spaces where different ways of thinking could combine and create something greater than any single species could produce alone. The transformation was not smooth or easy. There were conflicts. The Kellians, who had never actually opposed human advancement but had simply followed the Vorathi's lead, felt humiliated by humanity's success and required careful diplomatic handling. The older species struggled with the idea of sharing power and authority. But gradually, the new system began to work, and it worked better than the old system had ever worked. Dr. Lisa Wang was now leading a joint research initiative with Zyxthara engineers to develop new propulsion systems. James Rodriguez was working with Vorathi architects to redesign the station's lower sections, incorporating elements of human design, thinking that the Vorathi found fascinating despite their initial resistance. Dr. Rajesh Patel was teaching a seminar at the Council's Research Institute, explaining to alien scientists how human intuition and improvisation could complement their more formal approaches to problem-solving. Sarah walked through the corridors of the station, watching this new world being built. She stopped at a window and looked out at the ships arriving and departing, the traffic patterns more complex and varied than they had been just 6 months ago. Young species were visiting the station now, seeing the changes, beginning to believe that they too could claim a place at the table. A voice spoke behind her, Human Delegate Chen. She turned to find THRX, the Zyxthara engineer. His scales glimmered in the station lights, and his expression was impossible for Sarah to read, even after working with his people for months. Engineer THRX, Sarah said formally, I hope the new support systems are performing well. They are exceeding our expectations, THRX said. I wanted to speak with you about that. I also wanted to apologize for my initial response to humanity's presence on the council. I was resistant to change. I viewed our engineering as superior, and I could not imagine that a younger species might contribute something valuable to our designs. Sarah felt surprised. Apologies were rare from the Zyxthara, especially from someone as proud as THRX. I accepted your apology, she said carefully, and I appreciate it. I also want to acknowledge that Zyxthara engineering is remarkable. We have learned so much from studying your work. The new support columns are successful because of the combination of our ideas. Neither of us could have created them alone. THRX made a gesture that Sarah had learned meant satisfaction or agreement among the Zyxthara. This is what the council needed to learn, he said. Not that younger species were superior, but that diversity of thought creates better outcomes than tradition and hierarchy alone. I do not know if this realization would have happened without your bold action. I do not know if the council would have changed if you had simply asked politely. Neither do I, Sarah admitted. Sometimes the only way to make people listen to reason is to force them to face the consequences of unreasonableness. A dangerous philosophy, THRX said. Yes, Sarah agreed, but it works. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the main observation chamber overlooking the council room. The representatives of 47 species were taking their places for the evening session. They were different now, these delegations. There was less of the rigid hierarchy that had existed before. Species that had always voted together were now consulting with younger civilizations. The Vorathi were actually listening to suggestions from the Korvathi. Cooperation was beginning to replace obedience. Vorhak, the Vorathi representative who had presented Resolution 7734, approached Sarah. He was no longer leader of the delegation, a position he had held for 100 years. That role had been given to a younger Vorathi who was more willing to embrace the new order. Vorhak looked diminished somehow, his crystalline body not glowing as brightly as it once had. "You have changed the galaxy," he said to Sarah. "I am not certain whether to thank you or curse you for that." "Probably both," Sarah said. "Significant change usually makes people feel both grateful and furious simultaneously." "Perhaps," Vorhak said. He looked out at the council chamber below. "I spent 500 years believing that the Galactic Council's way of governance was optimal, that age and experience were the only true measures of wisdom. You showed me that I was wrong. That is both humbling and infuriating." "For what it is worth," Sarah said, "I did not set out to change the council. I only wanted humanity to survive. The larger transformation happened because you were forced to see what you had been refusing to acknowledge, that young species have value, that human thinking is not a liability but an asset, that the galaxy is better when power is shared rather than hoarded." Vorhak looked at her for a long moment. "You are dangerous," he said finally. "Not because of your weapons or your cunning, though you possess both. You are dangerous because you make people think, because you challenge assumptions, because you survive by adapting rather than by following tradition. I do not know if the Galactic Council can continue to exist as new species with human-like thinking enter our ranks, but I suppose we will learn." "You will," Sarah said, "and I believe you will be stronger for it." As the evening session began, Sarah took her seat in the human delegation section. She watched as the representatives discussed topics that ranged from trade agreements to new research initiatives to the establishment of a permanent human colony in the outer rim regions of the galaxy. Every proposal was debated seriously, with input from multiple species. Votes were conducted with genuine consideration given to minority opinions. It was not perfect. There was still bias and prejudice and misunderstanding, but it was better, and it was improving every day. Sarah thought back to what had started all of this, to her grandmother's words that she often recalled during difficult moments. "The species that survives is not the strongest. It is the one that adapts. And sometimes adaptation means being clever enough to solve problems nobody else can even see." Humanity had done that. They had looked at a situation where they were outmatched and outmaneuvered by ancient powers, and they had found a solution that no one expected. They had not fought with weapons. They had not fought with diplomacy. They had fought with intelligence and creativity and the willingness to take risks. And in doing so, they had changed not just humanity's place in the galaxy, but the galaxy itself. Outside the station, the stars continued their eternal journey through space. Inside the station, representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations worked together, learning from each other, creating new technologies and new systems of governance that would shape the future for millennia to come. The age of the Galactic Council's absolute rule had ended. The age of true cooperation had begun, and it had all happened because one human diplomat had understood that sometimes the only way to win is to change the rules of the game completely. Humanity had come to the stars not with the intent to conquer, but with the desire to be part of something greater, And in the end, that desire had made them greater than they could ever have imagined. They had not replaced the Galactic Council. They had transformed it. And in transforming the Council, they had transformed the galaxy itself, making it a better place for all the species who called it home. This was the triumph that no victory could measure, the achievement that no weapon could provide. This was the power of human adaptation, human ingenuity, and human hope. This was why the Galactic Council had decided to remove humanity. And this was why, in the end, it was the best decision they never got to make.